Stones and minerals are some of the oldest medicine on earth. From the Aztecs to the ancient Chinese, stones have been used as medicine for millennia. When we begin to work with stones, real magic can happen, and all we have to do is listen. So this is a story of listening. It's also a story of flow, opals, and letting go. And yes, it's also a story of chucking diamonds into lakes. So it all began with a Herkimer Diamond. I had been coveting a large Herkimer Diamond for a long time. Herkimer Diamonds in Taoist medicine are considered to turn up the volume in any treatment. They maximize the dynamic potential of any medicine combination or even just the medicine moment that you're in at this time in your life. So I had been looking for Herkimer Diamond to kind of turn up the volume in my life and use in my medicine practices. And I was at a conference in North Carolina when I came across the perfect Herkimer. It was a large one, about the size of my palm. And if anyone's ever looked for Herkimers, then you know it's not easy to find Herkimers that large. Herkimer Diamonds come from one place in the world, and that's Herkimer, New York. They are a quartz, but they're a little bit harder than normal quartz because they're actually formed within a rock formation. So when I found this Herkimer, I thought, yes, I'm going to grab this, I'm going to get it, I'm going to put it in my collection. But from the beginning, I remember feeling very much so like this was something I had kind of forced into place. Like my mind and sort of my ego was like, oh yeah, girl, you need a big Herkimer, so let's find one for you. Instead of just really like flowing with my intuition about it. But I had found this big Herkimer. It was gorgeous. It was a great price. If anyone's ever shopped for Herkimers, you know they are not cheap. So I brought it home with me. Fast forward about a year later, I was going to another conference in Florida, and I was feeling at that time in my life a little bit stuck in my spiritual life, but also in my creative life. My writing had sort of eked to a stop. My meditation practice was having difficulty. And what I really felt was that I needed to just turn up the volume on the medicine that was already present in my life, the ways in which I was already connected, already knew how to write and create and express myself. And I was like, okay, I think, I'm not missing anything major. I just need to turn up the volume a little bit. So I always like to choose one stone to travel with when I go on a trip based on my intention for that trip. So for this trip, I chose the Herkimer Diamond. Now, the moment I got to the conference, the first thing I noticed was the lake. A big, beautiful lake right next to where the conference site was. And the first night I was there, I went down to the lake with my Herkimer to sit and meditate and just soak in the Florida evening. And immediately, as soon as I got there and sat down, I got this feeling that the lake wanted me to toss my Herkimer into it. And I'm going to tell you, my immediate reaction was, hell no! First of all, I really like this Herkimer Diamond. Second of all, it's hard to find big ones like this. Third of all, this was expensive. I literally remember thinking, yeah, I don't think I'm spiritual enough for that yet. But the feeling was so strong. I literally had to put that Herkimer away in a pouch because it was honestly like this bodily vibration that if I kept that Herkimer in my hand, I would just subconsciously chuck it into the lake. It was one of the strongest sort of unknown bodily sensations I've ever experienced. So I remember putting that Herkimer away and thinking, all right, if I still feel this way by the end of the weekend, then I'll do it. So that night I went back to my tent and went to sleep with my Herkimer, and that is the night that the dreams of opals began. So I'm going to talk a little bit about opals in a bit, but you can hold on to this little tidbit about opals. When the Taoists first started using points on the body for acupuncture, before needles were employed, they used opals to create flow. So you can keep that in your mind. So I'm having these dreams about opals every night, and the feeling of needing to throw this Herkimer in the lake is just growing and growing and growing every day, to the point where I actually notice that I'm avoiding walking by the lake. So the last day of the conference comes around, and I'm resigned. At this point, the idea of even bringing that Herkimer home with me feels wrong. This Herkimer wants to stay here. So the same vendor that had been at the conference in North Carolina was down in Florida. So I went up to this stone vendor and I told her about what I was experiencing. And she asked me, well, are you sure the Herkimer doesn't just want a bath or to be dipped in the lake? And I was like, yeah, I'm pretty sure. I know how that feels, and this feels like throw me in the lake and never see me again. So I told her that and I said, well, I'm going home with an empty stone pouch. I'd like to bring a stone home with me. So I walked around the stalls and nothing in particular was calling out for me, but I saw this small golden Lemurian, which is another crystal, which is another quartz. Oftentimes it has an iron oxide inclusion. And I thought to myself, yeah, this seems good. But in a way that I knew I wouldn't hold on to it forever. That ultimately was for someone else, but for now it would be a good placeholder in my pouch. So just saying yes to what it was I was hearing and picking up on, I placed that Lemurian into my pouch. I took the Herkimer out and I walked down to the lake. I sat for a moment, but honestly not even that long because the time had come. And when I was ready, I chucked that Herkimer as far as I could into the lake. And I watched as it plopped underneath the surface, and I watched as all of the ripples disappeared, and I watched as I realized that I would literally never see the stone again, and I would have no idea even where it went in this lake. And I'm going to tell you, it was such a feeling of completion and release. It was absolutely incredible to let go of something that I had placed so much emphasis on and had sort of wrapped my development around in a very ego-based, sort of mind-based kind of way. Was absolutely incredible. So I went home feeling so light, and just a couple days later I was seeing a client. I do on-the-body treatments with stones, and I felt really guided to use this Lemurian crystal and place at the very tippy top of her crown. Lemurians are sort of renowned for their ability to help us connect into deep meditative states and open up to perceiving that light of the divine, or of our personal divine, our higher selves, what exists beyond the realm of our day-to-day consciousness. So after our session, she came up to me and she said, what was that stone you put on my head? For the first time ever in meditation, I saw light, and I saw this golden light. It was so beautiful. And I said, oh, it's this Lemurian. And I looked at her, and I looked at the stone, and I thought, this is for you. And so I gave it to her, knowing full well that this is why I had picked it up in the first place. I really had no intention of holding on to it. I gave it to her, and she was delighted. She took it in, and then she looked at me and she said, you know, I think I have something for you too. And I was like, really? What? She said, a few years ago I was given an opal, and it was one of my most beloved stones until a couple weeks ago I took it out and I thought, this stone is ready to go on to somebody else, and it's been sitting on my kitchen counter ever since, and I think this opal was meant to go to you. Now, I was floored because by this time I had been dreaming about opals for several weeks, and I thought this could not be any more perfect. So that weekend we meet up, she gives me this opal, and the very next day I attend a stone class where, I'm sure you can guess, the main stone we talked about were opals. I learned so much about opals that day, but one of the things that stuck with me the most was opal's ability to create flow. As it contains both silica oxide, which is quartz crystals, and water, opals bridge this amazing ability that is inherent to quartz, which is harmonizing, directing, and amplifying energy, as well as the energy inherent to water, H2O, which is really bringing flow, life force, creativity, and opening up new possibilities. So when this opal came into my life, I'm going to tell you, I had an amazing surge of inspiration, creativity. I was writing like mad. I really felt like this path that had seemed obscure just opened right up to me. And for me, the lesson and the learning behind this is just how important it is to let go. That really by letting go, we can find that inner flow. I think there's a tendency sometimes, especially for those of us who are on a path of self-growth or development, that when we find things that work or seem like they should work for us, we kind of hold on to them, come hell or high water. And the reality is that when we can learn to listen and know when it's time to let go of those emblems of our growth or our next step, we can actually create space for newness to come in. I gave energy to that lake, and in turn, that lake cycled back, gave energy to one of my clients, and then this opal came into my life and gave me energy to continue on in my path. And if we can connect into and listen to the ways in which this world of medicine that we live in is constantly communicating to us about receiving and letting go, we can tap into what I consider to be our mainstream. So a friend of mine told me once, it's not about connecting into the mainstream. It's about connecting into your mainstream. What is it that's flowing at the center of your being? And can you in some way just get out of the way so it can flow even more easily through you, so you can be carried along in a way? The cherry on top of this entire story was just about a year ago. I was teaching a class about plant and stone relationships when someone came up to me at the end of the class and they said, "Was that lake you were talking about the same lake at the Florida Herbal Conference?" And I said, "Yeah, that was the conference I was at." She said, "I went to that conference and brought a stone, and when I went up to that lake, I got the same message that this lake wanted to receive this stone." And I was blown away. It was just incredible to witness two different people at different times receive the same messages. But it just goes to show you that when we listen, we can make connections from heart to heart, person to person, medicine to medicine, and we can open ourselves up to what it is that's really there, waiting to be given, waiting to flow. So I'd love to hear from you. What are the pillars of self-growth and development, those stones that you've been holding on to and have maybe served you well, that you're ready to let go of? Those cornerstones of your development that are really ready to be given back to the world as a gift, so that you can open yourself to creative movement and flow and really embrace that next step in your life. I would love to hear your story below. And if this video really excited you or brought light into your life, then keep your eyes open for an online course I'll be releasing through Clarity Stone Medicine, all about how stones communicate, the subtlety, the mystery, and the power as well. So thank you so much for listening to me today in this story, and may your medicine path be blessed.